I work as a consultant, and it's not uncommon for one of my clients to either be looking for some money to invest in their business, to roll out a new product line, or maybe they're looking to sell their business. And through the course of working with people this way, I came across George Bergmark and Brian Callahan. George and Brian, George, you can start making your way up here if you like. They run the investor forum, and as I've gotten to know them, and then as you know, last year when I was asked to take over the president role of ECBA, right in the middle or the beginning of COVID, the message I got very clearly from the board and other people is business owners are freaking out, with this COVID thing. How are they going to survive? How are they going to make it? And so we got very focused on helping you be successful. What are the things that the ECBA can be bringing to you to help you be more successful? Well, today, many of you probably aren't thinking that you're ever going to need or want to sell your business, or you may never need an investor. But 5 years from now, you just might. And as I've gotten to know Brian and George and listened to some of the things they've told me, it's really not that difficult if you start thinking about it now. What are some of the things you can be doing in your business that will not only improve the business for yourself, but make the business something that maybe you could sell someday or attract an investor to grow? It just makes it a better business overall. So please help me welcome George Bergmark. Why don't you take this spot here? And Brian, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, now Brian, we've had a technical glitch. So what I'm going to, last night, no one can hear you right now, by the way, Brian. I walk in this morning and Rich says, everything was working perfectly. Then somebody moved a cable and it's not working quite right. So we put together this setup, but the way it's working, if I talk, it echoes through here. So when it's time for Brian to talk, I'll put it on, I'll shut up. And I'll take it off mute so there's no echo. The fun of technology. So let's begin. George, can you tell the group a little bit about your background and why you do what you do? And then Brian, I'll tee up your microphone.
Sure. I'm George Bergmark, and my company is GTSI Investor Forum, as well as GTSI Solutions International. And we help small and mid-sized companies grow their business, either through building it up so they can build value, or help them find money to grow. Now, when I was talking to Brian, we talked about how we were both entrepreneurs as kids. We threw newspapers, sold seeds door to door. But Brian, I started thinking about it. My very first entrepreneurial experience was I was 5 or 6 years old. I'd seen these kids shining shoes and making some money. My mom was going to the store, so I went with her. My brother and I stepped outside, and I grabbed this shoe shine kit. And this lady who looked like Fran walked by, and I said, "Can I shine your shoes?" And she said, "Sure." I'd never shined a lady's shoes before. I'd never shined shoes on somebody's foot. I'd always been on holding it. So I started shining her shoes with black polish. And at that time, a lot of ladies wore hose. I got black polish on her hose. And then I tried to wipe it, and it just got worse. Lesson number 1, before you offer a product or service, know what the heck you're doing. So
thank you, Brian, or George. All right, so now I'm going to ask Brian. Brian, can you introduce yourself to the group and tell them how you got started on this? And you are now off mute.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the ability to chat with you folks from the mountains of Southern California. I always enjoy my trips to Atlanta and the Investor Forum events, which are fantastic. I noticed that they showed a picture of me earlier, and it was very surprising to me that it looked like my head was bigger than George's. I can't imagine how that happened. So a little background on me. 32 years ago, I created an investment banking firm in Southern California by the name of Markwood Capital. And its whole mission from start till now is to help emerging growth companies get over the hump find investments, grow themselves into a very valuable company, and then help them find a liquidity event. Then about 16 years ago, I decided to open a company in Denver, Colorado called MCA Advisors. And that company consults with venture capital and private equity firms on some of their companies that are not succeeding as well as they expected, and looking at what the implied value might be, what the possibilities of enhancing that value or selling off the company or something else. So that is my history. And the two things somehow I would love to leave with some of you in the audience is, one, always surround yourself with great people like Brian and George and the people I've now met through this event. I'm so surprised how really friendly and valuable this event is already to this point. And then the other thing that doesn't seem all that important I'd like to leave is, don't give up on LinkedIn. I talk to people all the time who say LinkedIn is passé, LinkedIn is not as valuable. I promise you, there are secrets behind LinkedIn that make it very valuable. So thank you very much, Brian, and I can hand it off to you now.
I appreciate it. You're back on mute. So George, as I've prepared for this and reading some of the input from you and from Brian, one of the comments that came up is developing relationships with great people will make the growth process proliferate. Where have you ever seen that to be true? What are some examples that you've seen that makes that true?
Well, with our investor forum, which I started 2 years ago, I'd been on an advisory board of another company, and that was doing the same sort of thing. And the guy moved to Austin. So I said, let's restart it. So I talked to some of the people on the advisory board, and I got them to join me. And then we talked through it. And it was through their ideas as well as my own that we were able to get started really in July of 2019.
Well, one of the things that I've learned in my association with you is that when you have a small business, and again, you're thinking down the road, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but maybe the idea is, how do you position your company as a strategic acquisition for another firm? And I find that when you challenge yourself with that question, sometimes the answer is not that difficult. It's you just haven't thought about it before. And you told me, again, as we're getting ready for this, that you were in a position as a CFO one time for a company, and you decided you wanted to go acquire another firm. So you started meeting with these other companies and found out that none of them were acquirable. Can you tell the people a little bit about that?
Yeah, I had been the head of mergers and acquisitions for a pretty large energy company in Houston for 14 years. And I decided to look at businesses to buy with a friend, another Georgia Tech alum in Houston. We spent a year talking to companies. 90% of small businesses, the owner is the business. They do not realize it. They think because they control everything that makes them valuable. Well, they may be making more money today, but if somebody comes in and wants to acquire them, they have to stay. And I don't know how much time I got, but we had talked to one company that did stainless steel piping for the food manufacturing industry. They had Kraft, Frito-Lay, Dr. Pepper. They were trying to sell for $10 million, but the owner did everything. He didn't. I said, do you have your processes documented? He goes, no. So why not? He goes, I can't trust these people. I said, great. So we're supposed to buy your company? I said, you have to stay for 3 to 5 years. He went, no way. My wife says I have to sell. And that is the number one problem with small businesses, is the owner is the business.
So going back to Brian, again, you stated developing relationships with great people will make the growth process proliferate. Would you like to expand on that from your experience?
Absolutely. The real significant part is this: high quality people are attracted to high quality people. They surround themselves with high quality people. Therefore, the more you connect with these high quality people, you not only get your relationship with them, but you get access to their relationship with other high quality people. And it really adds a significant way to grow quickly with people, to concentrate with people, break bread with people. I'm a firm believer in that. And where that leads is mostly things like an advisory board. A lot of people try to create an advisory board with people they already know and that they've dealt with. Well, I call those friends of the firm. You already have that relationship. What you need to do is extend that and go after other people that you would love to invite to an advisory board, but you do not know them either well enough or at all. And you will be surprised how open people are when you approach them. In one case, we went to the executive VP of Harpo Studios, Oprah's company, and we got the executive vice president of Oprah, of Harpo, to join an advisory board without ever having known her. Her name is Harriet Seitler, without ever having any communication with her. So there are possibilities to get fantastic people to join an advisory board, and just keep yourself surrounded by those quality people. When it's time for a liquidity event, they'll be valuable. When it's time for advice, they'll be valuable. When it's time to have a great dinner with a bunch of wonderful people, they'll be valuable.
Wow, that was good information. George, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just going to say that with the investor forum, a lot of people that come and make presentations are people that have been in business for a while. But they still need that advisory board like he was talking about. We've just recently started talking with Georgia Tech. They have a group called Create X, and they have mentors, and one of the mentors is here, Ward, and he's a serial entrepreneur. I met him through Create X, and he's been involved in several businesses, and he's helping a young group of Georgia Tech grads that have a medical device, and he's helping them with the manufacturing. What's the process? There's so many processes that, you may have this idea for this chip or whatever, but how do you make it marketable? How do you make it commercial? And someone like Ward's invaluable to help with a startup like that.
So George, it's a good idea. I need an advisory board. I've never pulled one together before. How do I do that?
We might start talking to some of the other business owners and find out, do you have an advisory board? And they may say, yeah, I do. And this is how I found somebody. Or you might start identifying what are the gaps that you've got. We got all this technical knowledge, but we don't know the business side. We don't have a banker. Let's get introduced to a banker. Let's get introduced to a finance person, to a CPA, because they don't realize they can get some of these people to work with them for free or on a part-time basis.
It is amazing. I have found how much the person right next to you might know. You just know them from Little League or something, but holy cow, you get to know them a little bit, and they're a wealth of information. Brian, do you have any input in terms of how to form your own advisory board?
Absolutely. First of all, sit right in front of a blank whiteboard and then write down what you think the 5 key things are you would like to get from an advisory board. Is it increased sales because they know other companies? Is it financial information? Is it someone that is just so valuable and high up that it will increase the value of your company? Is there somebody that will just manage the meetings and give sage advice? You just create those circles. And then what you do is you go to some of those fantastic people you already know who have LinkedIn, and you go do some searches on C-level executives that they're connected to. You find 1 or 2 that you think fit that bill. You contact that person and ask how well they know that party. And you use that leverage to be able to talk to their admin or eventually talk to them and get them intuitively involved in the idea of an advisory board. And the next thing you do is every time you have an advisory board meeting where you bring people in, have dinner the night before, have a succinct 3-4 hour meeting. The next time you have an advisory board meeting, you send 2 or 3 of your people to each of their offices. Again, with Harriet Seidler, we sent the CEO to Harriet Seidler and Harpo's offices. That person, after the event, got to meet with Oprah, got introduced to about 6 or 7 other amazing Harpo executives. So going to their offices and sort of splitting, since we live in a Zoom world, is a very valuable instead of always bringing people to your offices.
Okay, you're back on mute. That was very interesting. I appreciate that, because oftentimes you have to step outside your comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah, even you're when you're afraid, you think, well, do I really want to grow? Do I really want? How big do I want to get? And then where does your comfort zone end, and where do you meet those barriers? I think we got an interesting lesson from Roseanne a couple months ago, and the times when she was pushed outside her comfort zone, was in a position that she had to really rally and pull things together to make her business successful. But it's interesting, Brian, thank you for that. So George, if someone is, and by the way, there's going to be time for questions, so if you want to ask questions, please be ready. If someone's looking to raise money or sell their business, how many times, first of all, what are the things that investors and buyers look for?
On your tabletops are the list of the 8 key drivers that investors are looking at. They're looking at your financial statements, of course. They're looking to see if your company can grow. They're looking at recurring revenue. In our group, when we were just talking, he was talking about, one of the people in our group was talking about getting away from project work and productizing a service or selling a product instead of selling deals. Because you do a project and you're looking at the next project. So they're looking at those sort of things. They're looking at, on your sheet, it's called valuation teeter-totter. But what that means is, are you cash flow positive or cash flow negative? You need to look at how you're cash flowing. If you're paying too soon, slow that down and find a way to get the revenue in faster. The last one on there is the thing I talked about before, where the owner's the business. And so that's called hub and spoke. But another thing that's on there is called the Switzerland structure. And that's where you need to look at your employees, the companies, and your suppliers. Pandemic really let us know how much of our stuff's coming from China. But as you look at it, do I have a key employee? If that person, we used to say, get hit by the turnip truck, but now we say if they win the lottery, if all of a sudden they disappear and my business just went out the door, that's something you need to look at. If the bankers like to call it concentration. So if you've got customers that make up 15% or more of your business, you need to work on getting more customers, and you need to niche down.
So Brian, let's say you're ready, you're looking for an investor, you're looking for a buyer. I've been in that position before, having to raise money, and it can be pretty hair-raising to do that. But if you're knocking on the door, you're getting ready to say, all right, I'm looking for an investor, I'm looking for a buyer, what should your expectations be in terms of how many times you're going to hear a no before you hear a yes? What are some of the obstacles you're going to come across? So could you address that one for us, please?
Sure. Number one, if you don't have enough credibility in your industry, you're going to need to grow that to be able to go and get a successful transaction or investing. You need to have, as George alluded to, a very strong customer base. You need to try hard to get more and more potential customers in line so that when they're doing due diligence for either an investment or a purchase, they see that there is an opportunity for them to take over some of that. And a buyer always feels like they can run your business better than you in the future. That's why they're paying for it. They think they have other attributes or other possibilities to increase the customer base. So let them have that but make sure they know you feel like there are a lot more opportunities. Let them know how you treat your employees, because anyone buying or investing in a company doesn't want to find out that in a year you lost half of your quality people, and then it's a real mess. And then the ability, especially if you're selling your company, to make it known that you will still be a goodwill ambassador for that company, because you hold a lot of the relationships. A buyer or investor knows that. They need to know that you're enthusiastic about being a goodwill ambassador. But one thing to also remember about any kind of a deal, I always tell my clients, this deal has a chance of dying 5 times before it closes. So if it dies once or twice, or things get really difficult, do not kill the deal. Keep trudging forward. Deals will close after 5 deaths. And I have a lot of experience, especially even in Georgia, of that being absolutely the case. So just keep moving positive, keep a positive attitude. Don't give up if they say no, just keep going.
Thanks, Brian. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Yeah, Tom, just a minute. Let's get a microphone over to Tom.
Stand too. Didn't know all these requirements. As far as starting your own advisory group or advisory board, what would you suggest as far as the mechanics, as far as venue, meeting time, meeting place? Is there anything hard and fast to look at there, or just see how it evolves?
So with the advisory board, so the very first person I asked to join my advisory board was Brian Callahan, and he was in California. So to be able to do that sort of thing, we're using Microsoft Teams or Zoom so that we can talk it through. Now, pre-COVID, Brian flew over practically every one of our meetings. So we would have an advisory board meeting either just before or just after, sort of to talk about how things are progressing. And the area that we're talking about right now is how to deal with startups. They can't afford to pay us to be a presenter.
Brian, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure. Make a advisory board meeting comfortable for yourself first and foremost. No reason to stress out on what you're trying to put together. If you are doing it at your offices and you have some people coming in from out of town, do the dinner the night before. Everybody will be in a great mood by the next morning. There will be some laughter from the night before and the discussions. It breaks the ice completely. If you need to do it a Zoom meeting, be sure and be the one to introduce each of these people on your advisory board, and even have some humor in that introduction. Because again, what you want are people just to enjoy it, to give sage advice, to know that you really are working hard to keep your company going, but not overly complicated. Just keep it something where you have a set 4 or 5 goals and you get it done in the meeting.
Thank you, Brian. Well, by the way, for people who ask questions, you get a book. So Tom, here's a book. Okay, we have another question. Oh, built to sell.
So when I think of how many businesses have gone out of business over the past few years because of the debt service. So when I look at this list, how do you weigh this list? Is growth of a business foremost? Is brand extension important? I guess the important thing is, how do you overcome the debt service?
It's got to be cash flow. And maybe you talk with your banker about refinancing as well, to spread that out. But when you look at all the other factors, and financial performance, not necessarily the top one, it's more improving your revenue stream. And with that teeter-totter, reducing and slowing down your payments. And if you're in a crisis, then you need to have time to visit with the people you owe. Let them know what you're doing to turn your business around. One of our presenters for this next month is a company that is an events management company, and the COVID has really hurt them. But they have a lot of assets, and they're in the process of coming out. So they're looking at a bridge loan to help get things restarted.
Brian, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Sure, absolutely. It's a really good question. As George alluded to, gross margin, gross margin, gross margin, coupled with credibility of your business or your product are the two things that will help drive away being over leveraged with debt. And I think that, you need to always look at strategic partners, people that are going to help you sell your product, things that don't require a lot of capital. And so in the end, if you take care of those things, if you make sure gross margin and EBITDA are the things that rule the way you run your business, you will end up very successful, even during some tough times where not enough gross margin or EBITDA are going to be available. You will at least be able to go forward with less debt than you otherwise would.
Thank you, Brian. Lori, do we have any questions on the Zoom land? Okay, do we have a question? One more. We have time for one more question. All right. Go ahead. Okay, so if I can recite that, don't bother with a manual, but if you had to document your processes, what was the rest of that? How would you what format should you document the processes?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Brian Kramer, because that's exactly what he does.
Well, I'll tell you, I learned how to do all this stuff at IBM.
That was his wife that.
Yeah, my wife put that in there. No. I just got so tired of building business plan after business plan after business plan that when you're done, it went into the drawer and said, now go back and do what you're doing anyway. And plus they'd beat you up and critique you over, oh, that business plan's no good. Okay, now stick it in the drawer where it's really no good. And I think one of the key things is how do you keep the processes alive and in front of people and they're actually using them. So to me, there's one thing I'm a big fan of are these workflow management systems that exist out there that help prompt people and can track things and know when the ball is being dropped. So it's not enough just to write the processes down. You need to integrate them into how you're doing things. And it's amazing. I used to gauge success of it by have my phone calls decreased and have my emails decreased. Because when you first take over and the processes aren't working, you're getting all these emergency calls. But when you really start to implement these things, and that, by the way, becomes your cookbook when you're selling the company or showing someone else who take it over, or you get ill and someone needs to step into your spot. Well, here are the instructions. This is how we do it. So the key thing is, how do you do this and keep it alive and meaningful?
I chime in on that, in that it's not just documenting, it's automating those processes so that it just happens. Because with the systems that are out there and available to you right now, if an order comes in or a request comes in, it can be set up with triggers so that it can automatically send that email. Thank you, Fran, for asking about that. Here's a link for the download for whatever.
And there's so many tools out there for that. I refuse to learn them. I just help people understand how to, what they have to get done, and then whatever tool they select, because there's just so many tools out there. Are there any other questions? We have time for one more. Go ahead.
How do you recommend a company that wants to sell evaluate their business? Because they sometimes get so emotional. I'm currently working with a customer and they have way too much emotional value in their business. Is there a good tool or a good formula to help them evaluate their business without the emotional attachment?
So with the upcoming ECBA Business Growth Challenge, that's one of the things that we'll be going through is going through a quiz. Takes about 13 to 15 minutes, and you put in your financials, you answer some questions. It'll give you a score. They'll let you know where you stand on these 8 areas. Now, it's going to give you an estimate of value. When you get ready to sell or you're getting ready to get a loan, you might need a certified valuation. So if you need a certified valuation, we can help you with that through Brian, not this one, the other one, through Callahan. He owns a company that does certified valuations, and they do a lot of work with the SBA already.
Brian, as we wrap this up, do you have any words that you'd like to share so we can close the topic?
Yeah, so first of all, I think the discussion, the question about process management is highly valuable. I'm exceptionally impressed that that was brought up today because it is a deep part of success for a company. And I think that on the question of trying to understand how somebody just believes so heavily that their business is worth so much and that it's going to kill a deal, I think that you have to ask them for a highly developed pro forma, because if that person gives you a pro forma that says next year I'll do 3 million, the year after that I'll do 5, and then 7, those are all even numbers. That is somebody who has not gone in and done it from the bottom up, because the number should have been 3,146,000 and then 5,242,000. That means somebody took exactly what it's going to take to get there. And then you can start valuing that company with more credibility. It's really tough when somebody is so involved in their company, they think it must be worth more than it is. You have to be very kind in those discussions, but you also have to force them to give you a 3 to 5 year pro forma.
So with that, I'm going to wrap up this topic. Let's give a round of applause to our speakers.